Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I am David Haugh from the 670 The Score, the Mully and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune. He is fresh off a trip to the nation's capital and also reporting at Haugh. It's been a while, Dan, since we've all been together. Adam and I reacted to the big 40-20 victory the night that it happened, but you now are catching up. There's been a lot going on. First of all, just how would you describe the whole game and what the victory meant to the Bears after waiting 346 days for their last victory?
Is that all? Is that all it was?
Yeah.
I will tell you that there was such palpable delight in that locker room on Thursday night, and it's carried over here into week 6. I think that's the best news is the Bears had extra time to sit on those feelings, to use them as sort of the good vibrations that are so needed for a team that's looking to kind of climb from the bottom tier of the league to the middle tier. And so I think that the combination of relief and satisfaction and joy was just all there. And I think it is beneficial to them going into this week where, again, they dive into division play against the Vikings.
Vikings Sunday at Soldier Field. They come in fresh off another loss. They've only won once this season. They still are favored in the game. We'll get into that. We'll get into everything. Let's start it all with our opening drive.
It's time for the opening drive.
So, Dan, we'll get to a lot of the categories we typically get to, break down Justin Fields' game and everything else. Let's start with the injury report because Kyler Gordon designated for return, which is big. Also, equally big for the offense, Khalil Herbert is going to be out for a while because of a high ankle sprain. Saw him get twisted into a pretzel by a bad throw by Justin Fields, and now it looks like Darrington Evans has been poached off the Dolphins practice squad. And D'Onta Foreman might play a larger role because of other injuries. Roschon Johnson in concussion protocol. Let's look at those two situations. Offensive backfield, defensive backfield, both affected.
Which one you want to start with? Because I think
Defense.
They're both notable. And on the defensive backfield, the Bears have been optimistic since Kyler Gordon went down with the hand injury that his recovery would be right on the timeline that they needed it to be on. You get through the 4 weeks on IR. You're designated now to return from IR, which gives you a 21-day window to actually be activated to a 53-man roster. That should come this week. It seems to be pointing in the direction of Kyler Gordon being able to practice, being able to play, being able to be back in that secondary at a time when they could really use him. At the same time, you would expect Jalen Johnson now with a little extra time to heal up from his injury that he suffered in Kansas City to be back and ready to go. I mean, look, like this, there's an irony to all this because Jalen Johnson forever has wanted to have his battle against Justin Jefferson with the Vikings for myriad reasons. A year ago, he didn't get it because he was hurt. Well, now he's going to come back from his injury, and there's a possibility that Justin Jefferson will be out with his own hamstring issue, but certainly the Bears would be on the right side of that equation for once, if that is the case. But both those guys being back in the mix and then a potential return of Eddie Jackson would get what was a very, very strong unit in the secondary close to as whole as they're going to be from this point going forward.
I think that Kyler Gordon, the expectation would be that he's been keeping in shape, that the transition wouldn't be that much to ask. I suppose, and I don't know if it's realistic, Dan, I'm just trying to think out loud, because when you see Tevin Jenkins return to action as he did successfully Thursday night, pressed into more extended action because of the injury to Lucas Patrick, and you remember that it had been since mid-August, since his last contact. I don't think that, I guess I don't know. Are the Bears going to apply the same kind of logic to Kyler Gordon, thinking, well, you know what? It's been long enough. He's been without football. Let's just throw him back in there to play football.
Right. And, I mean, if you can acclimate quickly, if your conditioning is where it needs to be, if you can just get yourself back on steady ground, which Kyler Gordon should be able to do so, it's an opportunity. Jenkins is a whole different story because I think what we're looking for there is longevity, and a very impressive return on Thursday night. The ability to give the Bears 37 snaps in that victory in Washington was very beneficial, particularly as you mentioned when they had to reshuffle things when Lucas Patrick went out. But now you want to see, can Tevin Jenkins make it to November without any sort of injury setback? That's another one right there.
So in the offensive backfield, Khalil Herbert's absence, he was on he had a really good game rushing the football against the Commanders, and he was a guy that had emerged as RB1, if you will, and D'Onta Foreman had been inactive, and then the backup to Herbert, Roschon Johnson, the rookie, is in concussion protocol. How do you see those two affecting the depth chart, and when are those guys maybe coming back?
Yeah, and Travis Homer beat up as well,
Travis
which
Homer,
then
right?
forced you to go out and get a guy that you're familiar with. Darrington Evans, who was with this team a year ago, was hanging out on the Dolphins practice squad. Now gets a return to Ellis Hall. He spoke with the media on Monday in Lake Forest, so good to have him back in the building. But you're just reshuffling there. Now the good news is that was one of the positions coming into the season that you felt really good about the depth there. And so when you have a guy like Deontay Foreman, who's clearly going to be fresh after being a healthy scratch the last few weeks and has proven productivity, particularly last year when he took over for Christian McCaffrey after the trade in Carolina, you've got a guy there that's established, and he's a proven playmaker in this league and can give you something there where you don't feel as scrambly as you often do when you get hit with a wave of injuries. Now you just kind of got to reshuffle, figure out when Roschon Johnson's going to get cleared from concussion protocol, figure out what your special teams needs are, and make some decisions from there.
So, how do you see it affecting Foreman? How do you think that the Bears will go into the Vikings in terms of a depth chart?
Yeah, and well, I think some of that depends on what Roschon's able to give them. And if he does get the green light, I would figure that it would be Roschon and Deontay in a work share, the way that they've been doing things. One more thing on Khalil Herbert, you mentioned that injury, and it was, I didn't notice this until my rewatch that a better pass actually turns that into a touchdown from Justin Fields if he gets out in front of him. It was actually a good instinctive decision by Justin to keep his eyes up and make the throw, and then he just throws a little awkwardly, and Khalil bent in a Gumby like position that when we watched the replays in the press box at FedEx Field, I was punching the desk in front of him. And now, as you mentioned, he should be out for a few weeks with what's a tough setback given the way he was running the ball.
Is Gumby like hyphenated?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, Gumby hyphen
Okay,
like.
I just want to make sure. Yeah. Overall, though, in terms of Herbert, did it surprise you how effective he? I guess my expectations going into the season were that he eventually was going to get beaten out by Roschon Johnson. That didn't really happen. Maybe that was on the way to happening, but I thought that he had been maybe better than expected. What did you think of him before he left?
Well, look, the game against the Broncos was truly impressive, and it gave you that element that you really want when you're trying to form an identity like the Bears offense is, which is just establish the run and be able to lean on it. He, on the second drive on Thursday night, broke off his longest run of the game, which was just a great burst through a nice hole. And when you're able to create holes for Khalil Herbert, he's got the chance to be a playmaker in that regard. And then one of the plays that I starred on my notebook during my rewatch was the last possession of the first half. It's a 3rd and 7, and they opted to kind of play safe and conservative and give the ball to Khalil Herbert on a 3rd and 7 play, and he picked up the first down and much more and kept churning with the help of some good blocking from Cody Whitehair and Nate Davis. And that's it, right? They like when you see those things, you're like, that's winning football right there. When you can lean on a bunch of different things, and that will be missed in the short term, and hopefully Khalil Herbert's return isn't too far off.
One more running back thought before we move on to the next question about the injury report. How do you answer people who point out that the Bears have an injury and depth concerns at the running back position? Meanwhile, up in Detroit, David Montgomery enjoyed a 100-yard game as part of one of the best teams in the NFC and looks faster than ever.
Well, the Lions have dedicated themselves to David Montgomery here in the early seasons. Look, the Bears didn't turn their back on David Montgomery. The Bears offered David Montgomery a contract in free agency. It's my understanding that it was very much in line with what he got from Detroit. The value of being a free agent is you can choose where to go. And David Montgomery chose that he wanted a fresh start. He wanted to get some new opportunity and some new scenery. And to his credit, he's making the most of it there for Jared Goff and Dan Campbell in Detroit. The Lions, man, that looks like a legitimate operation right now. The Bears will see them next month. And David Montgomery is a very big part of how that team continues to churn out victories in an impressive fashion.
I think that's a good answer. That's the right answer. It's a fair one. I do understand too, though, that at the end of the year, if he has 1,000 yards and we're evaluating the pros and cons of Ryan Poles as we look to the big picture offseason again after another losing Bears year, then David Montgomery is going to fall under the con category because he let him walk out the door and wasn't able to retain him. And that's a talent at a position that, while it's not a premium position, still a very important one in Chicago and around the league.
That's fair. I would just say that the Bears, I think, were comfortable with what they were able to do on the whole at that position, the depth they were able to add. Now, look, like if Deontay Foreman does not give you what you want, in Khalil Herbert's absence, if Roshan Johnson doesn't give you what you want in Khalil Herbert's absence, then those questions are very legitimate and very justified. But I think that that's one of the few positions that I didn't lose a lot of sleep over in the offseason or even at the start of the season, because I thought that they gave themselves an opportunity with some fortified depth there to withstand some setbacks. And here we're going to get a test of that.
And I didn't mind because I thought they were going to draft Bijan Robinson. So I was all
they
excited.
they might have too, right?
They
Like
might
we
have.
never know if they
Yeah.
would have.
So last injury point, Doug Kramer is eligible to come off the injured list. Lucas Patrick gets banged up. Any connection there? And what do you expect to happen with Doug Kramer?
Well, yeah, certainly when he's designated to return and you see Lucas Patrick hurt again, this has been a trend since he became a Chicago Bear. He has also been one of those guys who hasn't been able to stay healthy. You want to have some depth at center. If this means that you're going to push Cody Whitehair back into the position that we thought he was going to be in back in the spring and summer, then so be it. He's got to work on a couple of those shotgun snaps and make sure that he doesn't shoot them high and away from his quarterback. But look, Doug Kramer's return gives you depth on the offensive line. We'll see how quickly the Bears are able to get him back on the 53, and then whether there's a corresponding move in that regard with Lucas Patrick.
All right, the other big issue I think that was addressed on Monday at Haugh, it continues to be one that kind of confuses me a little bit. I understand why Matt Eberflus might consider going outside the organization to bring in somebody as a defensive analyst or a defensive consultant, or even if they wanted to have somebody call defensive signals, which he apparently is against. What I don't quite get at this point is the public nature of the courting or the thought process, because it only makes you feel like they're more indecisive than they should be when they take this long to decide something this relatively minor. I wonder what you think about it and what you can add to what you heard on Monday from Matt Eberflus.
No, good question. And confusion is kind of a Monday staple at Haugh during my time on the beat, and it's certainly been that way this year. I think some of it is just in the way that you message it and the way you talk about it. And Matt Eberflus now multiple times in the last couple of weeks has hinted at the idea that there's going to be a new addition to the coaching staff. He makes it seem imminent, and then in the next breath says, if that's the direction we choose to go. It sounds like they've had contact with several candidates for a senior defensive analyst role, which would help take some work off Matt's plate. Obviously, in the wake of Alan Williams' sudden resignation last month, you're trying to find someone else to share some workload. And Matt's words on Monday were that this person would be primarily responsible for doing advanced scouting on the next opponent and being a week ahead and being able to provide the book on that opponent in a way that helps their coaching staff hit the ground running when it comes time to prepare for that given week. Who is that person? We know it's not Rod Marinelli. He said that even though his longtime friend and mentor has been in touch repeatedly throughout the season, that he's very comfortable in retirement and is going to stay there. I was told that former Bears cornerback and former longtime coach in the NFL, Leslie Frazier, is not interested in that position at this time. So who is it? When is it coming? What exactly will happen when they do it? Matt Eberflus couldn't even say today whether it would be a position that would be based out of Haugh or remotely. There's a lot of gray ambiguity floating around this thing, but I read the room today to say that there is going to be some sort of announcement here in the near future that they have added someone to their defensive staff. If they don't, I don't know why they've brought it up so many times.
All right, let me ask you three names. You tell me if it's yes, no, get out of town. All right, the speculation. Gary Pinkel, the coach that gave Matt Eberflus his start in coaching. He's 71 years old, I believe, and he's been out of football for many years, probably since 2016, I think. What do you think about Gary Pinkel?
I know Mizzou alum Brad Biggs would be very, very excited about the possibility of Gary Pinkel joining that role. So I'll veto that just to make Brad a little upset.
Okay, but that seem a little far-fetched, even though it would be on brand, because it would be somebody that Matt Eberflus trusts, respects, and wouldn't necessarily have to move to Lake Forest to get this done.
I think, when you hear their criteria of wanting somebody with significant NFL experience, that would be one thing to keep an eye on. They also, this would be a pro side, but like they want familiarity with the Bears system, and so that would be something that you'd have to sort through as well.
Lovie Smith.
I doubt. There's love. No, get out of town with that. There's no way that.
Okay, I
that would,
mean it's been suggested. I'm just a messenger. The messenger just is scurrying out of town quickly. But I think that you shoot him away. But still, Lovie Smith is a name that has come up.
it just feels too awkward to me to return in that capacity and to kind of Lovey's too big of a figure in this town to just kind of sit quietly in the background as a
Oh, I
senior
totally,
defensive analyst.
I totally agree. It's a terrible idea. But it's a terrible idea. I mean, we have romanticized the tenure of Lovie Smith to the point where if he would come back in that role, we would need trumpets and a coronation because of the way that we have built up what he accomplished at Haugh as the head coach. Those were the halcyon days compared to the last decade. So I think that, yes, you could not bring somebody in with questions about the head coach, the current head coach's viability and experience level, and then, oh, this defensive assistant, meet the guy that you're compared to.
The last guy who went to the Super Bowl here. Yeah.
Yes.
No question.
Terrible idea. Get out of town.
All right, good. Glad we agree.
Mike Singletary.
I don't remember if we mentioned this on the podcast or not, but he was in the building recently and, has connections to both Matt Eberflus and Kevin Warren. I'm not sure what his current interest level in something like that would be. I wouldn't turn my nose up at it in that particular role. I think like you have a very specific defined role here in terms of what Matt Eberflus laid out on Monday. I'd be okay with that.
And the last name is only because we talked to him about it and he said he was not interested, but he didn't say it really with a lot of conviction, to be honest with you, because he's a friend of mine, Dave Wanstead.
Doesn't sound like he's interested.
It doesn't, does it? But it might be something that he reconsiders, and maybe that's why there's hemming and hawing, because
you have to give up the lucrative media deals that he has.
I would love it if he didn't, and he did both jobs. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
That would be fascinating to have Dave Wanstead in the studio on Tuesday morning on his way to Haugh to break down some tape. And then, by the way, text me on the way home, Dave, because we want to know what you watched and what you think of it. That would be terrific from a media standpoint.
Yeah, no question. And maybe you could give us some clarity on some of the injury situations as well.
But it would be something like that, right, Dan? I mean, somebody who has been in the business, somebody who, and I don't even know if it's necessary. Here's my take on this whole thing. I don't know why there's been a conclusion reached by the head coach or the organization. There's nobody on his staff that's qualified or worthy of a promotion or the extra job.
I just think it's more a manpower issue where you lost a defensive coordinator, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of workload that comes with that role. And now the head coach is assuming a lot of that. And then it spreads him a little bit thin while he's trying to juggle different things. It's just a manpower issue. I'll give you an example. Back in the day when we were actually teammates at the Chicago Tribune, you remember how big the staff was, the things we were capable of with a big staff. Well, now we're not that big anymore. And so there's things that I would love to do that I can't do because we don't have the bodies to do it. So sometimes adding a body helps the productivity of all the bodies that are already there. So I thought that analogy would probably hit you directly in familiar areas.
I'm just going to ignore the analogy to the head coach there. I'm not even going to touch that one. I won't even get into what that means about what. Never mind. You're coaching. you're the primetime player.
I'm just an assistant. I'm just an assistant.
Okay.
Here.
All right. Let's move on to our QB1 segment. All right. So Justin Fields had his second straight strong game in the air. It certainly helped that DJ Moore was there to throw to and to make the most and have his own career night. 230 receiving yards, 80% of the Bears output in the passing game. Dan, I can't believe that as the Vikings get ready to come to town on Sunday, that Kirk Cousins leads the NFL with 13 touchdown passes, but Justin Fields is one of 4 quarterbacks in second place with 11. 4 of those came against the Washington Commanders. This was a big night for Justin Fields, his second straight big statistical game. This time, he did not have the turnovers. This time, I think he could leave feeling very good about what he did on the field.
8 of those touchdown passes, David, came in a 5-day span. Obviously reopens the door to imagine that this is a significant moment in a young quarterback's development and growth process. Now we have to see what he backs it up with and how the consistency goes from week to week to week. How you handle success, how you handle failure has been impressive, and now you got to string some games together. What was terrific during my rewatch on of this game was just how in control and in the flow of everything the quarterback and the offense were in the first half. They put up 307 total yards in the first half against the Commanders, scored 27 points. You and I talked forever about this team's inability to score 21 points in a game. They got 27 before halftime and did so in convincing fashion, scored on every single drive of the first half. And you saw quarterback David from the first drive through the end of the first half that just was locked in and making big plays. Now, look, I'm not going to grade on a curve because DJ Moore elevated the performance. That's why you got DJ Moore. You went and got him a legitimate number one threat so that he could lift the quarterback in moments where the quarterback needed to be lifted, and the quarterback could lift him in ways that he needed to be lifted as well. Awesome night for those two guys together, and it started on the very first series, with the 58-yarder on 3rd and 9, and then a 3rd and 14 touchdown pass. It's just an absolutely tremendous performance by that group.
First category, defining moment. Is one of those plays yours?
Yeah, no question. For me, it starts with the touchdown to the start of the game. You could go with the 58-yarder a couple plays before where DJ Moore put that nasty double move on Benjamin St. Juste, but the touchdown for me was Fields in control of the moment. It's 3rd and 14 there. You want to make sure you walk out of there with at least a field goal, but that doesn't mean you get gun shy, and it doesn't mean you don't take a look at a window where your top receiver is running. It doesn't mean you don't try to manipulate the safeties on the back end with your vision. Justin played that play perfectly, and he ripped the throw that, in my opinion, 3 weeks ago he's not making for whatever reason. When we're sitting there up in the press box going, throw it, and then it doesn't come out. Here it was, boom, boom, bam. It's out. It's in DJ Moore's hands. It's a touchdown. You felt the entire energy of the group rise with that scoring drive. Bears, remember, they won the coin toss and chose to take the ball. You go down and you back up that confident decision from your coaching staff with a touchdown drive and a touchdown pass like that. It's a defining moment, in my opinion.
Well, that's where I was going to go. I think that's a good inclusion because, to me, the defining moment for the night was, and I'll pair these. Maybe I should start. I'll go with my defining moment, the last touchdown pass. The last touchdown pass was the 56-yarder to DJ Moore with 4:09 left, to seal it, the dagger, whatever you want to call it. But it was also the end of sort of the lull that occurred, and you started to wonder, like, here we go again. Oh man, Luke Getsy, do not fall into this trap. And that was more aggressive, waking up to the way that the Bears had approached the entire night. The defining moment of the night was actually the coin flip when they said, we want the ball because we are going to, what they basically said was, we're going to attack. We are confident in our offense and we're going to get a lead. And then the last touchdown kind of related to that followed through. So opening statement, closing statement, both strong in the sense of that they were going to seize the opportunity. And I think that's important for an offense that built on the momentum that was created against the Broncos and continue to come out with that sort of aggressive mindset that was evident early and then when it needed to be late.
What a delightful rewatch for once. You're like, man, is this what it was like in Green Bay for 30 years, that every Monday they got to go back and look at video of a high powered, like, you just see how the other half lives and you're like, man, right. I would love this to be part of the new norm. If they can continue this on and build on what they're doing right now instead of regressing like we've seen so many times.
So there weren't many down moments for Justin Fields, but did you have an uh-oh moment?
So my uh-oh moment is what we talked about earlier. It's just the attrition in the backfield. And the reason it's my uh-oh moment, and we talked about the throw to Khalil Herbert that winds up with him having an ankle sprain. It's not just uh-oh because the throw wasn't great. It's uh-oh because now you're testing the depth of your running back room. And what worries me and why I say uh-oh to that is if it opens the temptation for you to overuse Justin Fields as a runner on design quarterback runs and exposes him to more potential hits and possible injuries, that could be one uh-oh side to having your running back depth depleted, because it could put more on the legs of Justin Fields, which we're trying to keep that in a healthy place. And I think they have the last few weeks. It gets you into uh-oh territory really quickly.
Related to that, the only time you really said uh-oh was when Jonathan Allen picked up and body slammed Justin Fields. You don't want to expose him to those kind of moments, even though it was one of those things where I'm surprised there wasn't a flag. I think in 15 other games and 28 other quarterbacks, 29 other quarterbacks, you're probably going to get a flag there. He picked him up. His feet were off the ground and he threw him in the turf. He's so hard that when he rolled, he knocked over Nate Davis, and Nate Davis fell on top of him too. So you're like, uh-oh, what's going on there? And I don't know if it was something that, because he's a big guy and because he inflicts his own share of punishment when he's running the ball, that referees tend to look at things a little differently when it's Justin Fields. But here we go again. It was like one of these things where that could have been, it seemed like more than a football play on a quarterback. Great tackle if it's a running back, but it wasn't.
Well, so this is an interesting topic of conversation, and I'd like to kind of do my own homework on this in the coming days. It's just, had Justin converted himself from a thrower into a runner at that point, which then kind of changes the way they officiate it. Once you have committed to being a runner of the football, you're afforded less protection when guys are trying to tackle you. Now, if he's standing in the pocket and Jonathan Allen does the exact same thing, I think he gets flagged for unnecessary roughness. But Justin had tucked and he was running forward, and I think that's one of those things where it's a really thin line for officials on trying to decide, what to call and what not to call. But I think that is something to keep in the back of your head, that once you have converted into a runner, they are allowed to do more to you than you are if you're standing back there throwing the football.
Fair enough. Good point. Nice distinction. But he may have converted from a quarterback to a running back, but the only way that he was going to get a flag was probably if he had converted into Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, or Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. Because I'll tell you what, if those guys got body slammed like that, there would be a flag. And I'm not being provincial and I'm not a cheerleader, but I do think that you get the calls when you are those guys that Justin Fields doesn't get for whatever reason, maybe because he's not as accomplished yet. But I can't imagine a scenario where Patrick Mahomes gets lifted off his feet, piled drive into the ground, and there is no flag.
No, I'm not going to dispute that with you. I think, for my purposes, I think there is a distinction to be made when you're a runner versus a thrower. I think you're right in saying that 9 times out of 10, the guys that have established themselves as the faces of the league have been beneficial of those calls. Yeah, interesting. And interesting topic, and interesting to keep tabs on going forward, because I do think that he's a hard player to officiate because he is so dangerous as a runner that you can't completely neuter an opposing defense when he's trying to run.
All right, we talked about a lot of other things on the bright side. Unless you wanted to add a positive, we'll get to our key number.
My key number, well, we can tie them together. The on the bright side, and my key number is 307. It's 307 yards in the first half of a football game. Like, wow. What? Like, I got the halftime box and I was like, wait a second, is this last week's final? You know what I mean? You're not used to seeing those numbers associated with the Bears offense. And like I said, it was just so fluid. It was just so rhythmic. It was so in control in the first half. I mentioned this on WSCR on Monday. The second drive of the game was my favorite drive of the first half. And the reason why, it only resulted in a field goal, and it stalled at the 4 when Cole Kmet stopped a yard short of the first down. But there were so many little things that were done well and so many things that went right. You've got a designed quarterback run on a read option wrinkle that they got Justin out on. There's a pass to Robert Tonyan that is a very short gain, but it's just quick, decisive, ball on target, ball on time. There's a smoke screen to DJ Moore that the ball is thrown in the exact right spot so that it's not high and away where DJ's got to adjust to it. And now the defensive back sheds his block and takes you down for a gain of 1. It gets out for a gain of 9. You get a tush push on that series, and you get a first down with a well-executed sneak, which would have been very timely the week before against Denver. Big run by Khalil Herbert. There's a tight end screen to Cole Kmet. Now that one was a lucky break that the Bears got a bunch of on Thursday night, because that ball got punched out and Cole was somehow able to basically recover the fumble with his thighs, it seemed like, under that pile there. And then, you just had a whole bunch of plays where it was simple done well, and how many times, David, have we talked about them botching the simple? And then, there was a throwaway. Justin Fields had a throwaway on that drive too, where you go, okay, instead of a 7-yard loss, the ball went out of bounds and you weren't behind the sticks. And so it's just beautiful to watch. I would advise you go back and look at it just from the standpoint of, like, this is fundamentals. This is crisp execution. This is the fruits of that.
I think that they grasped common sense, it seemed to. I mean, they did the common sensible thing time and again that had been lacking a lot. I think that's a good one. My key number would be 158.3, and that is the passer rating on throws between Justin Fields and DJ Moore. 27 of 34 for 531 yards. That to me underscores what the identity of this offense is becoming. It's becoming an explosive, pass-oriented offense, which I don't think, maybe we didn't see coming. And I don't know how sustainable it is, because as defenses evolve, the Bears are going to have to adjust. But what's happened is that DJ Moore catching 230 yards worth of receiving yards is remarkable. It was historic, the biggest output since Alshon Jeffrey, the second highest in Bears history. And Justin Fields is, in that moment, either they're complementing each other, but we talk about him all the time needing to be a multiplier, needing to be the kind of guy that, and by doing that, it's by giving DJ Moore a chance to make plays and trusting him to do that. That's what happened. So all things seem possible with this offense when DJ Moore is the target of so many Justin Fields passes. And so I think that's the big development. The last couple games that we haven't seen, it seems like a long time ago now, and probably has been since we were complaining about only getting 2 targets against the Packers.
Oh, no question. And two of the most notable things I thought Justin Fields said post-game was, one, he said, look, when you get the ball to DJ, good things happen, so we need to get the ball to DJ more. Great example of that. Everybody involved, Justin, Luke Getsy, everybody with that offense has to see, man, we threw him the ball 8 times. He caught 7 of them. 230 yards and 3 scores. Like, we'll cash in on that every single week. And the other thing is Justin said he laughed out loud and basically said, I was surprised to see how often DJ was singled up. And there were times in the press box where you'd see them come to the line of scrimmage and you're like, really, they're going to go to a single high look with a corner out here playing man coverage against DJ Moore, and they're going to test themselves that way. Even that the game winner that you mentioned just a minute ago, or the game sealer, that pass from Justin Fields it's a probably 3/4 of a second late being delivered, and the DB jumps it. And even Darnell Mooney said that for a fraction of a second he thought it was intercepted. If that pass gets picked off and goes the other way, we're having a totally different conversation. But instead, DJ Moore makes a great catch on it, not only converts first down, but then takes it to the end zone. And again, it's like, this is the reason you have this dude in your building, because he's a game changer, and he changed the game all night long in Washington. And the Bears are going to learn a lesson from that.
You did remind me of another moment, though. The throws to Darnell Mooney weren't there, and he was open. He got open, and then just
couple times
didn't just deliver twice. So that's another reason why there was such a disproportionate number of passes thrown to DJ Moore and so many yards by him, because he missed Mooney, and that's something that can't happen moving forward.
No, and this is a big moment for the Bears offense, because now you have defenses fearful of what Justin can do to you as a runner and a scrambler. You have defenses fearful about what DJ Moore has shown now for 5 games. I think there was a stat somewhere, I'll have to pull this up for our numbers package later in the week, about players who have had averaged at least 100 yards and a touchdown in their first 5 games with a new team. The last guy to do this was Randy Moss with the Patriots. So it tells you what DJ Moore's instant impact for the Bears has been. Well, now that opens things up for Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's been productive the last 2 games. Now that should open a door for Darnell Mooney to be able to do a little bit more. And this is where good offenses become truly dangerous, when it's just like, okay, they've got X, Y, and even Z taken away. Well, guess what? We've got another answer right here in our back pocket.
All right, let's wrap things up with our 2-minute drill.
The 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill.
Related to our conversation about the offense, Dan, have to mention we haven't talked since Chase Claypool was given away to the Miami Dolphins for whatever draft swap compensation they got, and maybe some Florida Oranges. Not quite sure what was involved. But what did you think about that move? I think it's addition by subtraction, and I wish him well in his new team. And maybe this will be the wake-up call that his career needs for him to get back on track.
Was that you all over social media who was saying you were really impressed by the trade the Bears made?
That was not me.
That was not you. Okay.
That was not me. I would not be that guy. No. If you want to peg me as the guy making fun of people who might have congratulated Ryan Poles, I'm more likely to be that guy, as you might have heard on the Mully and Haugh show on Monday morning.
So you weren't celebrating giving away the 32nd pick for a guy who got you 14 catches, and then you get a conditional pick 2 years from now? That wasn't.
No, I was not. I was the guy. Sorry. I was the guy owning the fact that when they made the trade for Chase Claypool, I was optimistic and gave credit where I thought it was deserved. That this was something that, let's go back now, a year ago, there was this need and the clamoring for get weapons for Justin Fields, get him a wide receiver, do whatever you need to do, Ryan Poles, because you need to get the most out of your quarterback. He's such a great talent. And then they did it. I had questions and concerns maybe because Mike Tomlin gave up on him, but I wanted to give him a chance. Because Chase Claypool squandered that chance does not make the logic faulty. It's just that they gave up too much in retrospect, and now giving him away to the Dolphins, you get no congratulations for not being able to get the most out of a player in your organization.
I was joking with Mark Potash, who put on Twitter that, he put one of his sarcastic tweets about this is the parade route that the Bears are going to go on for accomplishing that trade. I said, look, you've got to pull this tweet back up in the final 90 minutes of day 3 of the draft in 2025 when they're picking in the 6th round instead of the 7th. Now you've got an opportunity to really hammer that home. Back to your original question, subtracting Chase Claypool from this equation is a win. The trade is a loss from a year ago. Getting rid of whatever that was, whatever that juju was in that room, whatever just the headaches and the emotional fuel you have to spend trying to deal with high maintenance issues. Like just get it out of here. This team is not in a position to deal with diva tendencies from a guy who didn't produce like anything, And so look, like, farewell, best of luck in Miami. Maybe Mike McDaniel can unlock something, and maybe Chase Claypool being in an organization that looks like it's on its way to a deep playoff run in January will be a better situation for him. You heard Cole Kmet last week say, like, Chase is a little bit easier to deal with when he's winning a lot, right? And so maybe the change of scenery in that regard will be helpful, but like, I wouldn't turn my head over my shoulder for a second if I were Ryan Poles at this point. You take the L on the 2022 trade. You feel satisfied that DJ Moore is here and that we will probably never have to think about Chase Claypool again from this point.
Addition by subtraction, I agree. All right, defensively, Greg Stroman Jr. had himself a very strong game. I thought it was interesting because the team that drafted him was in Washington, and then he comes back and he didn't he go to Virginia Tech nearby, relatively nearby?
His family was at the game, yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing. And he made a couple of nice plays. You like to see that happen, especially when pressed into action. And I think it was interesting, too. Matt Eberflus, a little more aggressive defensively as a play caller, trusts the secondary, even though they're playing without 3 starters. And I think maybe it was just desperate times call for desperate measures. But Greg Stroman Jr. also made that look like a wise decision.
So Greg Stroman was one of the players I talked to post-game at FedEx Field. And I just want to share kind of behind the curtain look at our job at certain points, because it had been, I think you said 346 days since I had been in a winning post-game locker room. And you get used to, like, do I want to talk to player A? Do I want to talk to player B? And then after a loss, you're like, do I really want to, like, ruin this guy's Sunday evening by going to ask him about some play that, I'm only going to write a paragraph about, and he screwed up on, and a guy got behind him. Well, this was the first time in 346 days where it was like, hey man, how cool was it to make that, takeaway that lent itself to the victory that broke the losing streak? How cool was it to come into the third quarter and time up a blitz really well and sack Sam Howell? And you had forgotten what the cheerful energy in the back and forth can be when players are making big plays and they're resulting in victories. My God, couldn't we just get that even 7 times a year? That would be a fun little thing for all involved. And I give Greg Stroman a lot of credit for how grounded he's been really all offseason through the summer training camp at being in his role at that moment. That role obviously heightened when Kyler Gordon went on injured reserve. And when you get a moment on a primetime stage and you seize it, you deserve all the applause that comes your way.
Another shout out, Cairo Santos, 4 field goals. He's been remarkably consistent really since 2020, Dan. I mean, he's been really solid.
Yeah, he had the extra point blips last year, but otherwise really, really good.
And four field goals on a night that they score 40 points often gets overlooked, but he's at the point where maybe you take him for granted a little bit.
It doesn't get overlooked when Joey Sly misses a kick and pushes it wide right at a point where, the Commanders really could have applied some psychological pressure to the Bears there, and so when your kicker's making all your kicks and their kicker misses one, and now all of a sudden the cushion gives you that breathing room and that anxiety level comes down again. Like, David, there's so much in this game where you're like, that is winning football. I said it earlier. This is a performance where you started fast and you finished strong. It's a performance where your stars DJ Moore and Justin Fields played really well, and your role players like Greg Stroman and Kerry Blasingame and Andrew Billings and Darrell Smith stepped up. It's a game where you just got a complete three-phase performance. You had offensive fireworks. You had 5 sacks and 2 takeaways. Winning football. It's like the adrenaline starts going because it's been so long since we've seen a team be able to put it all together like they did on Thursday night.
That's a great point. The only last thing I had was to point out 2 guys that stood out the second time you watched the game. To me, on defense, the lineman was Andrew Billings, who I think had a very strong game. On offense, Darnell Wright at times is as nasty as advertised, and you can see the traits that are going to make him a fixer at that position for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, look, like there's a lot to like in that dude's physical skill set as he continues to get more comfortable. And now I think Ryan Poles is very eager to see what his original offensive line was supposed to look like with Jenkins and Davis back in the mix, potentially having Cody at center. And then obviously we got to keep an eye on the return of Braxton Jones in the next month or so. But you could get closer to whole. And if you have a very sturdy, stable offensive line, all of a sudden the quarterback gets a little bit more comfortable and less nervy back there, and that opens the door for a lot of good things.
Anything else we left out?
No. Look, again, a long week here in week 6, which is good for the Bears and a division opponent coming to town. Like the Bears aren't good enough yet, David, to kind of start looking too far ahead and being like, oh, we got a chance to get on a real roll. But this particular game is a moment, right? It's a moment to seize at home against a division foe like the Vikings and to start to inject some relevance back into a season that for 4 weeks was an absolute disaster. It would be really cool if they could back up the win in Washington with a home win in front of the crowd at Soldier Field.
We'll take a look at that game in more detail on Friday morning when we drop the next Take the North podcast. For now, for Adam Studzinski, our producer, Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, I'm David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app and for watching on the Scores YouTube page. We will talk to you. One more thing from Dan.
Yeah, just before we go, because I wasn't part of the post-game pod on Thursday night, did you offer a formal apology to Studs? Because he was very adamant that the Bears had moved the ball well a year ago against the Commanders, and we kind of laughed him out of the StreamYard room here. And I just wanted to make sure on the record and on the air we gave him a formal apology because he was probably owed that.
It was pretty late, so I don't remember if I did or not. I would tend to remember when I apologize because
you're welcome, Studs.
A lot, but yeah, sorry, Studs. If we overlooked that, I probably forgot because it was kind of late. But I will definitely thank him and apologize the next time we see him in person. He is vindicated as he lets us know in the chat box. So, all right, we're all taken care of. We have all the penance served, and we're ready to roll. Thanks for listening to the Take the North podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
Great talk to you out there.